समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
From neck to waist, the young black man's skin had been peeled by the metronomic application of a metal-tipped whip until his ribs showed through. The punishment for stealing a packet of cigarettes. The air seemed filled with a bloody haze, recalled a young American signals intelligence officer. Colonial Leopoldville's black residents were clubbed off the sidewalk for not stepping aside for whites. To amuse themselves, perhaps, white drivers who ran over a black person were known to sometimes turn around and do it again. Even Americans shaped by segregation-era race values, historian Susan Williams records, were shocked by the brutality of Belgian colonial Congo. But they weren't there to build democracy. The uranium that would be used to bomb Hiroshima and Nagasaki was being mined in Katanga by slave laborers of the Belgian company Union Minière. The Americans just needed the job done, no matter how. This week, as ethnic Tutsi M23 insurgents continued to overrun swathes of the Democratic Republic of Congo, or the DRC, killing thousands and displacing many more, it's become clear the cursed country is in the middle of potentially the most fateful battle of the new Cold War. The DRC is the world's largest producer of cobalt, which is critical to producing batteries, and also holds vast reserves of strategic minerals like niobium, tantalum, and coltan, things that power your mobile phones and advanced chips. For countries like India, the stakes in this war are enormous. To participate in the post-hydrocarbon global economy, our country needs secure and fair access to those minerals. Even though India has troops in place in the DRC as part of a United Nations peacekeeping mission, their hands are tied by rules of engagement which prohibit active involvement in the conflict. This has reduced United Nations peacekeepers to what the researcher Thierry Vircoulon has called a state of exemplary inutility. Like many other post-colonial nations, India lost out in the First Cold World War. It's again being threatened with being cut off from access to critical resources by the unfolding conflict between China and the West. Led by the warlord and accused war criminal Sultani Makenga, M23 has the support of Rwanda and its president Paul Kagame. His regime, in turn, is propped up by the United Kingdom, Europe, and the United States. For its part, China, whose dominance in industries like electric vehicles rests on its investments in the DRC, is backing the regime there as well as its military. The conflict has been underway since 1996, spawning what international organizations are calling the most significant humanitarian crisis in the world. The imperial ambitions of King Leopold II of Belgium set the stage for the carnage now ongoing in Congo. The 23 years of his rule, which ran from 1885 to 1908, is estimated to have cost the lives of 10 million Africans. Adam Hochstild's majestic history, King Leopold's Ghost, reveals that Belgian power rested on the chopping off of hands and genitals, floggings, mass killings, the burning down of entire villages. Figures like Alice Seeley Harris, Mark Twain, the novelist Joseph Conrad, and author Conan Doyle campaigned against these atrocities at the times. But morals could not compete with the world's greed for the most valuable commodity then, cheap rubber. Even though Nazi leaders would be punished for using slave labor in Europe during the Second World War, there was never any trial for the Belgians who made America's nuclear bombs possible. The summer of 1960 finally brought independence to Congo. and given its enormous natural resources, prosperity ought to have followed. The new nation, however, simply did not have the tools for self-governance. Lawrence Friedman, the great strategic analyst, writes that, and I quote, of 5,000 government jobs, only 3 were held by Congolese. There were no Congolese doctors, lawyers, economists, or engineers, he writes. The commander-in-chief of the armed forces, Joseph Mobutu, who we'll hear more about as the story goes on, had never been promoted past sergeant. Led by one-time beer salesman Patrice Lumumba, the new country found itself facing multiple crises. Following rebellion in the country's fledgling armed forces, Belgian troops intervened on multiple occasions. The mineral-rich province of Katanga, egged on by the Belgians, declared secession, followed by the region of Kasai. Lacking revenues and any kind of institutional structure, Lumumba then turned to the Soviet Union for support. The consequences of that choice were predictable. Lawrence Devlin, the Central Intelligence Agency chief in Leopoldville, which is now known as Kinshasa, warned of a looming communist takeover. The United States, an official document notes, initiated plans to overthrow Lumumba through assassination if necessary. Even as the United Nations tried to rein in an increasingly erratic Lumumba, an effort, by the way, led by the eminent Indian diplomat Rajeshwar Dayal, the country steadily walked towards the edge. Lumumba, a Belgian parliamentary investigation later concluded, was murdered in 1961 under the supervision of high officers of their country. Army Chief Mobutu seized power and crushed efforts by Lumumba supporters to regain control, using the services of the shadowy South African mercenary Mike Hoare. Estimates made by the economist Stephanie Matty suggest Mobutu and his cronies embezzled between $4 billion and $10 billion of the country's resources. That, of course, left very little for education or health or any of the things a new country needs. Enabled by the West, Mobutu's long despotism continued until 1997. Following the end of the Cold War, the West slowly lost interest in the DRC. Beijing was quick to step in. China's involvement in Congo's mining, especially cobalt, is staggering. Following a 2007 deal, 2 Chinese firms built roads and public infrastructure in exchange for a 68% stake in the Siko Mine's copper and cobalt mine, one of the largest in all of Africa. From 2015 to 2020, China's imports of cobalt from the DRC increased by 191%, cobalt oxides by 2,920%, and copper ore by 1,670%. Of the 19 cobalt operations in the DRC, 15 are now owned or co-owned by Chinese entities. Well over 2/3 of the world's cobalt is mined in the DRC, and 4/5 of that is then sent for processing in China, where it turns into the batteries that power our EVs. As control of the Middle East oil fields underpinned American and European domination of cars, railways, and aeronautics for a century, the minerals of the Congo are the foundations on which China's domination of the age of electric power is being built. The rise of Chinese power had its genesis in genocide, which swept Rwanda in 1994. Ethnic Hutu militia, following their defeat by Tutsi militia based in Uganda, fled the border into the DRC, which was then called Zaire. They used their new bases across the border to wage a war of attrition against President Kagame's regime. Kagame responded by unleashing his army against the forces of his numerically superior but resource-strapped neighbor. Laurent Désiré Kabila, a one-time left-wing leader, was chosen by Kagame to lead the DRC after the Mobutu regime collapsed. Trained at the People's Liberation Army's National Defense University in China, Kabila found Beijing willing to enable his kleptocratic regime. His son and successor Joseph Kabila, who ruled from 2001 to 2019, consolidated the China DRC modus vivendi. The investigative journalists Michael Kavanagh and Don McCary revealed that the Kabila family was at the center of a web of companies with stakes in the mining sector who siphoned off multi-billion-dollar revenues. Global Witness, another transparency watchdog, estimated that at least $750 million, about a fifth of Congo's mining revenue, was misappropriated between 2013 and 2015. The long and bloody conflict, which has seen Uganda and Zimbabwe forces fighting for proxies, has been fueled by greed for the DRC's mineral resources. The DRC government uses its wealth not to help its people, but purchase military equipment from China, as well as to support regional troop deployments from South Africa and Tanzania, as well as a range of ethnic militia, including Hutu rebels. East European mercenaries have surrendered in large numbers to Rwandan forces, and some fear Russian mercenaries could also be involved by the government in future fighting. For his part, Rwanda's Kagame has recruited the support of Turkey and Qatar, as well as allies in Europe, especially France and former colonial power Belgium. Even though the United States has called on Rwanda to withdraw from the DRC, the country is leveraging its role as a counter-terrorism partner against jihadists who are fighting in Mozambique. For most Congolese, however, life remains not much dissimilar to that they suffered and endured under colonial rule. 3/4 of the population live on less than $2.15 a day. Wealth has proved a curse. The lessons aren't hard to understand. The global order that United States President Donald Trump says he wants to dismantle sought, among other things, to provide norms for nation-states to cooperate to protect resources of value to the entire global community. Even though the First Cold War routinely witnessed savagery, among them the slaughters of civilians in the Koreas, in Vietnam, Afghanistan, so many other places, the great powers also collaborated through that period to ensure stable global access to resources like hydrocarbons and to build smooth transnational trade networks. Like Congo, many regions of the world today could fall into the abyss, pushed by superpower competition and unrestrained greed. The price could be highest for countries like India, which is a good reason for New Delhi to push hard for new cooperative systems to keep the peace in the fragile regions that hold the world's future. I'm Praveen Swami, and I'm a contributing editor to ThePrint. Thank you for watching this episode of Security Code.